All right, so we just played Crusoe's Planet, which I guess is what, like an economic simulator?
Yeah.
And it's a roll and move game. You roll dice and you move along these tracks and you get those resources, and then you decide how much those resources are worth and buy them and continue to do that. You need a certain amount of resources to survive every round, so you need a certain amount of food, and so here's kind of all the things that you need. You need a certain amount of food, a certain diversity of food. The more food you eat, the better. You definitely need water, and then leisure and other things give you points as well. And how you get those things is what the economic variants are based off of. Sometimes it's pure capitalist, like what we played. There can also be socialist and communist economic systems, and you can add a bunch of variables in there. Sexism, racism, slavery. You can have more government involvement, and it's initially a simple concept that just escalates when you add more things. So, Jacob, what'd you think?
I thought it was interesting. It's definitely like the biggest thing that we came up with in the first game is when everybody playing national capitalism, which is just basic democracy, everyone has one vote, and a standard capitalist like economy. As soon as everybody decided that we collectively wanted to win, which is an option, there ceased to be interesting decisions to be made because we're all just optimizing everything for everybody making it out okay. And that was really boring.
Yeah. So
their scenarios don't have that problem necessarily, and you can play best score wins, which also changes that. But by default, that's a thing.
So to recap, the game went where I essentially, to get off the planet, you need to scan radio waves. So I was scanning the radio waves while the other two players were getting resources, and I didn't have as much money because of that, and I was basically living off the good nature of the other players actually trading food for me. Because if I didn't do the radio, we don't get off the planet, but by doing the radio, I can't actually get the resources that I need to do stuff. So once we have, and the chances increase the more radio waves that you search. So once we get to the point where we know that we're probably going to get it this turn or the next turn, it just becomes a question of making sure that, I can basically just say, well, I'll continue to scan radio waves as you continue to feed me, and that's pretty much the end of the interesting decisions in the game. But there are other scenarios where, because we all win if we have a positive score, but there are other scenarios where whoever has the highest score wins, and we just decided not to play with that. Sophia, you had something to say?
Yeah, so I think that it was probably, like, normally I'm a big fan of, like, highest score wins mechanics in semi-cooperative game, or at least, call it a double win or whatever. But here I think it wouldn't have worked very well. And the reason I think it wouldn't have worked very well is because I can predict what would have happened if we had. Andy attacked Jacob earlier. Jacob won. Because
I attacked early because I was so far behind that I felt like that was the only way that I could succeed. But yes.
But the point is that because we weren't playing highest score wins, Jacob had no incentive to just take all your stuff. Had we been playing highest score wins, Jacob was quite a bit behind me at that point. Jacob should have taken all of your stuff.
Yeah. And then I would have been out of it, and it would have been a two-player game.
And then you would have been out of the game, and it would have been a two-player game, but it would have been closer between Jacob and I. And then if Jacob and I weren't close enough in points, whoever was far enough behind should have killed the other.
Yes, and then it just comes down to a die roll of whoever.
Right.
And then the thing is...
So I'm not sure a highest score would have been
The
great.
problem with that scenario is one person alone still has to make it off alive, and it is much harder for them to collect the radio waves and get all the resources they need to feed themselves. I don't think one person can realistically get off, especially since the escalating nature of the negative point penalty. If you're already to here and one person's trying to go it alone, they just can't harvest enough stuff to not lose points every round until they're in the negative, and it doesn't matter. So while that makes sense, that's an everybody loses situation, which is like, it's still a thing. If I can't win, I can make sure everyone loses, but it's not an I win situation. It's a I'm just desperately trying to kill you so we all die in vain on the planet because I can't win the game.
Yeah, so I'm not sure what the answer is. I think the answer is maybe that the rulebook specifies certain units of utility for each outcome, such as highest score, lowest score, and people buy into those utilities. But that's impossible to have happen in a semi-cooperative game.
Are we okay with this just being a cooperative game? Is this fun as a cooperative game? Do we feel like it's too easy as a cooperative
It's
game?
too easy as a cooperative
Yeah,
game.
it would be too easy as a cooperative game, and the whole bidding mechanic I thought was very good. It's not quite. It's a very good approach to price discovery. It's not the optimal approach to price discovery.
Pretty
in bidding.
fiddly, but...
There are better ones, but this was a pretty good approach.
All right, Jacob, what other scenarios would you be interested in trying in the future?
I wouldn't mind trying, and the problem is I can't remember how they differentiate socialism and capitalism. Like, I read it, but now that I've had to dig so deep into the capitalist, but one of those, the socialism versus communism, one of them is more interesting than the other one, and I think trying that, or trying the standard, what is it called? It's not standard. It is the...
It's amusing that the rulebook is probably the heftiest part of this game.
Yeah. Traditional economy, where everybody has an assigned role, an assigned track, and how taxation works and who benefits directly from it. You have people making unilateral decisions about how they take from some players and give and are forced to give to other players, and violence can be used to just switch which track you're assigned to, change your status in the game without directly affecting goods. And I think you could have a really interesting game there. That seems like it has a whole different dynamic. And if you want to just add significantly more negotiation to it, you can add, adding the land ownership and capitalist, where someone starts out as a capitalist where they have diamonds. Then some players, 2/3 of the remaining players are middle class, 1/3 of the remaining players are labor, and taxation and violence rules apply differently to each of those levels, and how they work and leisure applies differently. So now you have a very unequal system that emphasizes certain things for different people depending on the role they're assigned, and once again, then you do most points wins, but that only is really going to be good when everybody understands the strengths and weaknesses of each position, and when they need to aggress or when they need to threaten aggression during trading, to be I'm going to attack you from my point of advantage unless you specifically disadvantage yourself, and being able to read when the person's in an advantageous enough position to where you can force them. There's a game there too that's a very different kind of game.
Right. One of the things I think lacked in this game was the possibility for less drastic combat outcomes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the combat is basically just a single die roll, and it's an all or nothing thing. So essentially the way the combat works is you have to spend, so you have these leisure tokens that are not easy to get and are worth money or points at the end of the round, and that they're listed here how much they're worth. So 1 is worth 0, 2 is worth +2, etc., etc. And you need to spend 2, 1 to open government and 2 to fight, and then you roll 2 dice, or you roll a die and the other player rolls a die, and then whoever has the higher die roll, assuming no one has a spear, wins. And when they win, they basically can take everything that the other person has. Everything. If they choose to. They choose how much they want to take. And that's a pretty, a pretty huge swing. If you have a spear, then you have a +1 modifier. But yeah, having combat not be that drastic, I guess, would make a difference. And it's not, I don't know.
Also,
I know it's an
advanced
economic simulator, not a combat simulator, but
in some of the more advanced scenarios, there also, for certain rules, there is no leisure cost to initiate violence, or there's a reduced or altered the cost to initiate violence, which once again, it's not just a straight massive point swing depending on how much leisure you have, and it opens up more options for, I didn't collect any leisure, therefore I cannot commit violence. I have the alternative, and that always leaves it as an option on the table for me, allowing me to throw my weight around.
Do you think this game would have been more interesting with the variants with sexism or racism or slavery or?
So the racism variant is a really cool way of implementing it, in that the racism rules are simply one player is singled out as the minority, all other players lose a set amount of points based on if they have less points than the minority player. So it just straight up incentivizes other players to make sure the minority player doesn't score as many points without forcing them to disadvantage him to losing, it's a really elegant way of doing it. I think that ultimately, whether or not it adds to the game is going to be based on the economic and government model. I don't think that is going to significantly add or detract. Like, the big problems we were talking about are not fixed by simulating those other side things. Those would just make an already interesting game have an additional flavor, but you need to find the right economic and government. Yeah.
But also have a lot more fiddly.
Yeah, correct.
Which is, I mean, it is a fiddly game. I mean, we're constantly, if we want to look at Sophia's little sheet there, Sophia, if we want to look at her sheet there was a lot of, adding and
Right.
a lot of math, and we're
So-
constantly having to do.
This up here is the notes I took for what our laws were that round, as far as what wages we were paying for people to collect radio signals and how we were apportioning taxes. These are the notes I took for how much the money pool was for each type of good. It varies according to supply and demand. And these are the notes I made during the game for what I was willing to bid for the various commodities as they came up for bid.
So it's not, I mean, and the cubes also don't come with the game. We have to basically include those. Normally it comes with kind of Sierra Madre game style
Paper counters.
paper teepees. So there's it's fiddly. It has, it's not the most elegant game, but it is hugely sandboxy. There's a ton of replayability here with just adding different economic models, different government models, different variants. Is this a thing that you are interested in trying more of?
Yeah, I would definitely want to try a different scenario.
Yes,
a different
I would-
economic model would be
Right.
fun to play with.
I wouldn't play this
This
same
again?
scenario until maybe I'd played more of the others,
Mhm.
but I would like to try it with a different scenario.
Yeah. So I mean, you get your bang for your buck with this. Once you get through all the things, and I don't know. I mean, I definitely haven't mentioned my kind of opinion on it. I think this definitely lacked a narrative arc. It was really just doing the same thing for 4 rounds, and kind of just seeing what happened. That you do kind of add a little bit with the experience, so you can, if you go down the same track, you can try to modify die rolls, but it doesn't really help too much. So yeah, I think, and we didn't even play the basic game. We played the basic advanced game.
Advanced.
So
we missed an important rule.
Hmm.
When you choose to pick fruit, you get all of the fruit shown in the space, even if it's multiple types.
Oh,
okay.
I missed that.
That
Oh.
would have been relevant a couple of times
Yeah,
to
there
grab
would have been
apples
more
and
stuff.
bananas.
Yeah,
So it could have been a richer game.
yeah.
But that didn't really change.
It
too
doesn't
much.
apply to it doesn't apply to eggs and fish. So.
But so yeah, I mean, I don't know. It doesn't have quite the narrative arc, though. I guess you shouldn't really expect that from a pure economic simulation.
I don't know, with the government. Like, if we were playing representational government, where instead of everybody having one equal vote, every round we elect a president who has effective, unilateral authority for that round to dictate taxes and wages, you could have an arc there. Especially with more people, where a couple people can form a coalition to try to keep the same person in power, people using force in order to try and oust that, winning coalition of 3 players or what have you. Yeah, I could see it being a thing except when everybody's just on the same page with equal voting power, agreeing on what needs to happen.
Did we feel like democracy was an issue? I think that, I mean, particularly if we're playing democracy, a 3-player game isn't ideal.
No.
I think because it was basically 2 versus 1 the entire time.
Yeah.
I feel like the player count definitely should be higher, and perhaps something like that where we have a representational government and it's not just democracy is also Athenian democracy is not. It would make for a more interesting game.
Yeah.
Sophia, what do you think about?
Yeah, I think the representative democracy would have worked better because that kind of with a 3-player game, that's kind of what it ended up here in practice.
Yeah.
Jacob and I would agree on what were good taxes
And they would just
wages.
keep the peasantry down.
And we were trying to we made good choices, and
For yourselves.
we made choices that were sufficient to incentivize Andy to go hunt radio signals.
Right,
Yeah.
sure.
Okay.
All right, anyway.
Empirically, this is
Sure.
so.
Right. Well, so that's
Quantitatively?
basically Crusoe's Planet. There's a lot more game here, and yeah, maybe we will continue exploring it.